So nice that you're doing all this. It's really special. Okay, so I'll just start with a short Jai Radha Madhav and then we'll get Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Yashodanandana Jai Braj Jana Ranjana Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Braja Jana Ranjana Jaya Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radhe Jai Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jai Jaya Prabhupada Shri Radha Madhav ki Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai Hare Krishna, welcome everyone. So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, and I'll just share the screen. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from 3:25, 31, and 32. So I'll just share the screen so we can read. 31 doesn't have a purport, so we'll read 32. Okay. Maitrayuvacha vidit 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 viditvart vidit viditvartham kapilo matur viditvartham tham kapilo maturitham jata sneho yatra tanva bhijatah tatvan tatvam nayam yat pravadanti sankhyam provacha vai bhakti vitana yogam. Translation. Sri Maitreya said, after hearing the statement of his mother, Kapil could understand her purpose, and he became compassionate toward her because of being born of her body. He described the Sankhya system of philosophy, which is a combination of devotional service and mystic realization, as received by disciplic succession. Text 32. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Devanam Gunalinganam Anushravikkarmanam Sattva Evaika Manaso Vritti Swabhaviki Tuya Animitta Bhagavati Bhaktir Siddhir Gare Yashsi. Shri Bhagavan Vacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said, Devanam, of the senses, or of the presiding deities of the senses, Gunalinganam, which detect sense objects, Anushavika, according to scripture, Karmanam, which work, Sattve, unto the mind or unto the Lord, Eva, only, Eka manasa, of a man of undivided mind, vritti, inclination, swabhaviki, natural, tu, in fact, ya, which, animitta, without motive, bhagavati, to the personality of Godhead, bhakti, devotional service, siddhe, then salvation, gari, yasi, better. Translation purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Lord Kapila said, the senses are symbolic representations of the demigods, and the natural inclination is to work under the direction of the Vedic injunctions. As the senses are representatives of the demigods, so the mind is a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The mind's natural duty is to serve. When that service spirit is engaged in devotional service to this personality of Godhead without any motive, that is far better even than salvation. Once again, Lord Kapil said, the senses are symbolic representations of the demigods, and their natural inclination is to work under the injunction of the Vedic injunctions. As the senses are representatives of the demigods, so the mind is the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The mind's natural duty is to serve. When that service spirit is engaged in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, without any motive, that is far better even than salvation. The senses of the living entity are always engaged in some occupation, either in activities prescribed in the injunctions of the Vedas or material activities. The natural inclination of the senses is to work for something, and the mind is the center of the senses. The mind is actually the leader of the senses. Therefore, it is called sattva. Similarly, the leader of all the demigods who are engaged in the activities of this material world, the sun god, moon god, Indra, and others, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is stated in the Vedic literature that the demigods are different limbs of the universal body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Our senses are also controlled by different demigods. Our senses are representations of various demigods, and the mind is a representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The senses, led by the mind, act under the influence of the demigods. When the service is ultimately aimed at the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the senses are in their natural position. The Lord is called Hrishikesha, for he is actually the proprietor and ultimate master of the senses. The senses and the mind are naturally inclined to work, but when they are materially contaminated, they work for some material benefit or for the service of the demigods, although actually they are meant to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The senses are called Hrishikesha, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is called Hrishikesha. Indirectly, all the senses are naturally inclined to serve the Supreme Lord. That is called bhakti. Kapil said that when the senses, without desire for material profit or other selfish motives, are engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One is situated in devotional service. That spirit of service is far better than siddhi, salvation. Bhakti, the inclination to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is in a transcendental position far better than mukti or liberation. Thus, bhakti is the stage after liberation. Unless one is liberated, one cannot engage the senses in the service of the Lord. When the senses are engaged either in material activities of sense gratification or in the activities of the Vedic injunctions, there is some motive. But when the same senses are engaged in the service of the Lord and there's no motive, that is called animitta and is a natural inclination of the mind. The conclusion is that when the mind, without being deviated either by Vedic injunctions or by material activities, is fully engaged in Krishna consciousness or devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it is far better than the most aspired for liberation from material entanglement. Om Jnanam Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam. So this is a very wonderful verse, and some very nice points are being made in these verses. The first one, the last verse that we read, I just wanted to mention that how the verse says that Kapil Dev felt gratitude or compassion, and he became compassionate towards Devahuti, his mother, because of being born of her body. So I was just reflecting on this, that how though a great soul is equal to all, yet there's feelings of gratitude, loyalty, compassion, particularly towards a person who has helped them even more so than others, meaning that they still have spiritual emotions. They're not emotionless beings. Kapil Dev is such a great, yogi, a saint. Everyone he's seeing is a soul, but he particularly becomes compassionate toward her because of her being born of her body, which I thought was just interesting, that how even great souls like Kapil Dev have these inclinations. And in one place, Prabhupada writes that a pure devotee, it doesn't mean that he does not have emotions. A pure devotee can also feel emotions like compassion, feeling hurt. And he says this in the section of Jad Bharat, that Jad Bharat, he was Jad Bharat, this was after he was a deer, and then he becomes Bharat, Jad Bharat. He's a perfectly self-realized soul, and he's acting like he's deaf and dumb and, nothing to do with the world, because he only wants to go back home, back to Godhead. He doesn't care what people think of him. He doesn't want to be involved with society. His only aim is just to go back home, back to Godhead. Yet when Maharaj Rahugana speaks to him with harsh words and an insulting way, it's described that he feels hurt. His heart feels pained by the king's harsh words. And at that time, in the purport, in those verses, Prabhupada writes that how is it that he's a self-realized soul, yet he's still feeling hurt? Because even the self-realized soul, Prabhupada says, has feelings, has emotions. Those emotions and feelings don't overpower them. They're under their control. They are, and those emotions and feelings are always directed towards Krishna, in service to Krishna. But still, the senses, the mind, the intelligence, everything is there. So this is actually what now this verse is talking about, is okay, we have these senses, we have the mind. How do we utilize them to attain the highest goal in life? Right? How do we reach the highest destination? And throughout the Vedic scriptures, even in the Gita, we see that Krishna is emphasizing the role of the intelligence. Through strong intelligence, through discrimination, through knowledge, we have to cut through the bonds of material life. He says how the intelligence should control the mind and senses. The example of the chariot, the reins, and the 5 horses. So in that example, the 5 horses are the senses. The soul is the passenger. The driver is what? Driver is the intelligence. And what is the mind? The mind is the reins, the 5 reins that pull the horses. But they're pulled not by the reins themselves. The reins are going up and down here and there. But the intelligence is holding them, which is the driver. So in that analogy also, Krishna so nicely describes that we have to put the reins of the senses. We have to control the mind by the intelligence. At the same time, uh, what's very interesting is that in all Sankhya philosophies, the mind, the intelligence is said to be in the mode of passion, right? It's said to be in the Rajogun, even though the intelligence is what controls the mind, and it's being used in discrimination to discriminate between good and bad. Buddhi is always born of Rajogun, and the mind, the manas, which wants to go here and there and needs to be controlled, that's said to be in the mode of goodness. And so the question that comes up is why? Why is the mind, which is the whole problem, the mind misleads us here and there, said to be in the mode of goodness, but the intelligence is in the mode of passion? And the explanation is actually given here and in so many places in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And I didn't get time before the class to actually find that verse. But in a verse in the Bhagavatam, it says that how the Lord manifests in the seat of the mind of the devotee. The mind is actually the connection to the Lord. So when the mind is materialistic, then the intelligence needs to be used to control the mind. This is why we read Shastra, all these things, because the intelligence must be sharpened so we know what's the right thing to do. The intelligence must be used to control the mind. But once the mind is purified, then Krishna does not manifest in the intelligence, but Krishna manifests in the mind. And the mind is also known as the heart. In many traditional cultures, the mind or a person's thinking power is not considered to be in the head. It's considered to be in the heart, because a good person, they think with their heart, right? There's a Hopi African Native American community, and they have this saying that a kind of materialistic person, they think with their stomach, right? What's good for my belly? He says the realized person, they think with their heart, and he says the white devil thinks with his head. Of course, they were fighting with the white uh, intruders who were coming into their land. So that's why. But they pointed out very well that Western kind of education is thinking with the head. Let me think with the head, figure everything out. Everything is information, and this right and that wrong and this thing. Everything is sequential and analytical and databases and all these things. You think with your head. But in spiritual life, in human life, right, we think with our heart, because the mind rests in the heart. So Krishna appears in the mind. Krishna does not appear in the intelligence, because the intelligence is Rajogun. It's, am I smart or not smart? Am I understanding, not understanding? This is all the material plane. But pure love and simply meditation on the Lord, that is the function of the mind. And that's why the focus is, the key here also in this text, the key of focus is engage the mind in Krishna's service. Savai Mana Krishna Padaravindayor. Right? This was Maharaj Ambarish. That he engaged his mind in Krishna's service because the mind is a carrier of the senses. If the mind is engaged, then all the senses will be engaged. If all the senses are engaged, then the mind is engaged. Similarly, the senses also are more born of the mode of passion. Just like here it's saying that the senses are the representations of the demigods, and their inclination is to work under the direction of Vedic injunctions. So the senses each sense is controlled by the demigods. Like our sense of sight is controlled by the sun. So Surya is controlling our sight. If we don't have good sight, people worship Surya, and then that helps their eyes. Every sense has a leading demigod. There's a deva for it, there's a sense, and then there's the organ for that sense. Because they can also be very passionate. But then the verse says, as the senses are representatives of the demigod, so the mind is a representative of the supreme personality of Godhead. Because the mind owns the senses, Krishna is known as the mind because Krishna owns the demigods. He controls the demigods. And mind is because Krishna is representing, if the mind is representing Krishna, mind is made of the mode of goodness. The mind's natural duty is to serve. And when that service spirit is engaged in devotional service to the personality of Godhead, that is far better even than salvation. And then he adds a qualifier, without any motive. So because Krishna is the mind and Krishna is the leader, the controller of the senses, therefore he's known as Hrishikesha. He's not known as Hrishika, which means the senses. He's known as Hrishikesha, the owner of the senses. Right? So when the mind is focused on Krishna, then the senses must follow. So once we see Krishna within our mind, the senses will automatically be drawn there, right? Just like when we go to the temple and we see Radha Shyam Sundar on the altar and they're looking so beautiful. Then when the mind is focused on them, then all the senses go towards there. So he owns the senses because he's so beautiful. He attracts all the senses. He's so wonderful. He attracts all the senses because he overtakes the mind of a devotee. The mind of a devotee cannot think of anything else. Just like the gopis of Vrindavan, they say that our problem is that we cannot think of anything other than Krishna. Queen Kunti is praying, let my mind flow to you. Gange vogham udanvati. Let my senses and my mind just be drawn to you. Because once it's attracted by Krishna, then the senses can't go anywhere else. The problem is solved. And this is actually Rupa Goswami's definition of devotional service. So we know that verse, that's the definition of pure devotional service. That's anyam hilashita shunyam yana karmadinabhatam. But this verse, sarvopadi vinirmuktam, is his definition of devotional service. What is devotional service? Sarva upadi vinirmuktam tat paratvena nirmalam hrishikena hrishikesha sevanam bhaktiruchyate. It's very simple. Devotional service is simply engaging the hrishika, the senses, and then again there's a qualifier to that, in hrishikesha, in the service of the master of the senses. Hrishikena hrishikesha sevanam. Now in the Sanskrit language, when they define something, they always give the primary characteristic of that object and they give the secondary characteristics. Like, when someone says, define what water is, then you may say, okay, water is H2O. And then you further describe it. Well, it's kind of liquid, it's soft if you touch it. If you jump in it, you can't breathe. So those are secondary qualifications. You can also find hard water, which is ice. But water itself is H2O in any form, right? So when we define something, we give primary and secondary. So there's the Sorup Lakshana and there's a Tatashta Lakshana. And then when they define it, they always put the secondary qualifications first and the Swarup Lakshana, the primary characteristics, second. The same thing in the definition of Anya Vilashata Shunyam, pure devotional service. The lines 3 and 4 are the primary characteristics. Lines 1 and 2 are secondary. So the primary characteristic of devotional service, any devotional service, what makes something devotional service is Hrishikena Hrishikesha. Engaging the senses, our senses, in the service of the master of the senses. It's so simple. Anything that we do, that when we engage our sense, sense capacities in the service of Krishna, they become purified by engaging in the service of Krishna. When we engage it in Krishna's service, that is devotional service. Then the qualifier is what? Because Hrishikena means, Prabhupada says, purified senses, not just any senses. That's the qualifier. Sarvopadhi vinirmuktam. When we do bhakti, that's free from designations. That's free from, any form of designation, other than Jiver Swarup Hoy Krishnera Nityadas, that I am your servant, Krishna. That's my only designation. My only title is that I am your servant. That is, then those senses can serve Krishna very purely. Just like Queen Kunti says, Janmaishwarya Shuta Shribir Edamana Madapaman Naivar Hatya Vidhatum Vai Tvam Akinchana Gocharam. That a person who approaches you, but who still has attachment or desires in relation to Janma, birth, Aishwarya, beauty, opulence, Shri, beauty, Janma Aishwarya Shuta, Shri, and education, who thinks I'm a big scholar, I'm a PhD, I'm a, someone born in a very, rich or opulent or aristocratic family. I'm a very handsome, beautiful person. I'm a very, wealthy person. If we have these designations that I am these things, then we cannot approach you with feeling. When we go to the Lord, and so many pastime stories of devotees are there. When we go to the Lord, we have to go naked. Literally, we have to go naked. And this is the pastime of the gopis, right? Krishna shows, you come to me, take your clothes off. We have to go to him naked. Of course, to him, not to others, not in front of others, only in front of Krishna, right? We can, because he is our parent, right? In front of our parents, when we're a baby, there's no, we don't, that's surrender. Because he's the most kind, the most loving person. If we go with some designation, with some material, you could say mental designations, that I am such and such, then those senses cannot approach Krishna fully. Sarva upadi vinirmuktam, free from designations. Tat paratvena nirmalam. And then saying the same thing, which our verse is saying. It's interesting that Kapil Muni puts that in there. He doesn't miss the opportunity. He says, without any motive, right? You have to approach Krishna, but don't have motivation. Just the only motivation is, I want to please you. Not that I want to, nice bank balance and this and that. Krishna, please give me this and that. Then I will worship you. Tat paratvena, by the sole purpose of serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nirmalam, uncontaminated by the effects of speculative philosophical research or fruitive activity. Right. So, free from fruitive activities and mental speculation, karma and jnana. So these things further qualify. The more we do these things, the more purified our senses become, and the more we engage them in Krishna's service. So in this verse, Krishna is being called Hrishikesha. And here is another verse where he's called Hrishikesha. In the Bhagavad Gita also, 3 times, Krishna is referred to as Hrishikesha. Once in chapter 1, once in chapter 11, once in chapter 18. Whenever Arjuna is in difficulty, he says, Oh Hrishikesha. He refers to Krishna as Hrishikesha. Why? Because he says, my senses are freaking out. So please help me. control my senses. Particularly in chapter 11, when he sees the universal form, Arjuna is so pained. It's just like, my gosh, like this is too much. It's like, it's simultaneously, you could say the most awesome thing, but the most scary thing. and and he says, Hrishikesha, oh Lord Hrishikesha, because you are the controller of the senses, please pacify my senses by removing this universal form so I can see you, I can love you, I can serve you. So this is the verse of today. It's 8 o'clock, so I'll stop here and see if there's any comments, discussion, questions.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Let's
Hare
accept my
Krishna,
humble
Mataji.
obeisances of Guru Srila Prabhupada. It was nicely explained on the senses. I was also thinking that how you explained about the Kunti Devi, she also prays to cut
Mm,
the knot, actually, that
mm,
affections. So,
mm,
and then here it is talking about the senses. So she
mm,
was depending on the grace of the Lord.
mm,
And here I mean, the Kapila Devi is talking about the how we can control the senses.
mm,
So I was seeing the difference that the grace and our determination to control the senses go in parallel.
mm,
Yeah. But I was also thinking in a practical terms when we engage our senses um, in the supreme on the supreme Lord in terms of the devotional practices or in the terms of the devotional services.
mm,
Sometimes we may not get that taste, but still we try. Um, so how can these scriptures can help us to be determined and for by taking the examples of this couple of the teachings and then Queen Kunti's strong prayers to the
mm,
Supreme Lord.
mm. Yes. No, thank you for that thought and comment. Like, uh, it's it's um, just recently we was reading something which was saying how yeah that how if we engage our senses in Krishna service, then we are assured success. At the same time, the reason why we are assured success, if we engage our senses in Krishna's service, we know that Krishna's mercy will be inspired, his grace will be inspired. And if his grace will be inspired, then there'll be sure success. So they say assured success, but of course it always depends on the grace of the Lord. And that depends on our, engagement, and then our mood. Is it done in that surrendered mood, like we were speaking about, without upadhis? So it's a combination of both, right? It's a combination of both. It's grace and our effort. Our effort is the engagement of the senses, always engaged, right? So if we're always hearing and chanting, we'll get purified 100%, right? It's so many places in the scriptures it says if 24 hours a day we're chanting, where else can we go? Krishna will take us back to Godhead. He'll purify us. Yet we cannot do that. Even to do that, we need the grace. So this is why, Devahuti, as you're mentioning, she was begging for the Lord's grace, because even to engage our senses in the service of the Lord requires the grace of a devotee. And once we engage it in the Lord's service, then the next step depends on the grace of the Lord. So when Mother Yashoda is tying up Krishna, then the rope is too short. It's always two fingers too short. And that, as you know, is mercy, is grace and effort. Right? Krishna is showing that you need more grace and you need more effort. More grace, more effort. That these two things are lacking in our life. That's why we're not able to tie Krishna completely. And then once she does that, she keeps putting effort in. Mother Yashoda keeps putting effort in. She keeps trying. Again, she fails so many times, and then she tries again. She fails and she tries again. Um, then Krishna allows her to bind him. Then his grace comes and he allows to bind. So, in the same way, when we again and again try to use the senses in Krishna's service, and we again and again fail, yet again we try. Okay, I was trying to control my senses. Again, I failed. I saw the ice cream, I had it, and then I failed. Or whatever it is. I mean, ice cream, nothing bad with ice cream. Just giving an example that, like we like weight loss. That's like an example, right? Relevant to myself. That you think I won't eat, but then you eat, but then you try again. So it's like that with the senses also. We keep failing, but then we try to control the senses. And one time, some mercy comes, and we overcome that upadhi, that thing that's we're struggling with, that attachment, that attachment we cannot cross. Krishna somehow helps us cross it. Does that help, Mataji?
Thank you, Prabhu, that is nicely explained. The
I
hope
cannot hear you.
giving verse.
Your voice is a little soft. So
Oh,
yes.
can you hear me? Yeah. Very nicely explained about the hope giving verse. You said effort and mercy always go in parallel.
Mm.
Yeah, when we have that strong effort and determination, obviously the mercy can come. That's a hope giving verse. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. One time my Guru Maharaj said, we were just like a few people there, and one devotee was complaining that, I'm not able to control my senses. Unlike these people, like, and he mentioned some big names. And he said, you have to understand, even the very advanced devotees, he said, even they struggle in controlling their senses. But the difference is that they don't listen to their senses. Even for them, the senses disturb them, but they are able to, so even he was saying the advanced devotees, like, this is not disturbing. I mean, but this actually illustrates the point. Like Prabhupada one time was saying that sometimes I remember my family as a sannyasi. He was saying to his disciples, he was saying, sometimes I remember my family, and sometimes I even cry remembering them. So even the same point that we started with, that a devotee even has emotions, and sometimes the senses may bring something, some thought or something like this. But why the pure devotee is completely undisturbed in their focus to Krishna is because they don't let those senses bother them, because they've offered them to Krishna. Krishna is now the controller of those senses. Okay. Yes. Any other comment, question? Thank you, Mataji. Very nice.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, can I ask a question?
Sure. Hare Krishna, Mataji. And
So I joined a little late, so I'm not sure if this has already been covered, and if it has, then please just ask me to go watch the first part, and that's okay. But so regarding the mind and intelligence, so you said mind is in the mode of goodness, and intelligence is in the mode of passion.
it's
And
born of mode of goodness and mode of passion. So it has the capacity to be in goodness. Like it can be fully purified. Yes.
the intelligence,
No, the mind.
the mind.
Yes.
So yeah, so I guess I'm a little confused about this because I'm going back to um, Bhagavad Gita, and then chapter 6 is the whole thing about Chanchala Imana Krishna, and it talks about mind being in the modes of goodness, passion, ignorance. But then
Mm.
we also have in chapter 18, and I'm not too sure, but maybe it's 1830 to 32 or something like that. It talks about intelligence also being in the modes of sattva, rajas, tamas.
Mm.
Um,
Yes.
so I don't know. I guess
Yes. So
so
that's the thing. So yeah, intelligence is born of the mode of passion. So there's different gunas at the time of creation. guna shaktis, and each one produce different elements, and they produce different senses and all these things. So in the Sankhya system, intelligence is born of the mode of passion, right? But like you're saying, this is a very good point that you're bringing up. The intelligence also can be engaged in Krishna's service, and then it can go on the transcendental level. The intelligence can also be focused on goodness, passion, and ignorance. But the question that comes up is, why is intelligence born, of Kriya Shakti? Why is it born of this element of passion? And that's because the Lord manifests in the mind. And Prabhupada writes this, it's not my speculation. Again, I was not able to get that verse. The Lord is ultimately received through the mind, not through the intelligence. Please go ahead. Mm.
No, actually, I'm not even sure if the question is very clear in my own head. But no, so that helps what you said. Isn't it also, so I know I heard, I can't remember who, either Romapada Swami or Kesha Swami Maharaj. I remember listening to a lecture once where they said that the mana is in, it's more along chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita, where in Kali Yuga, the mind is just bombarded by different thoughts and feelings and emotions and everything. And so like Krishna understands that. And so you can, so you don't get too like learn to recognize it as the mind, right? I mean, that's like one of the first instructions, like don't associate with the mind. And it's only when you actually act upon those thoughts, those feelings, those emotions, that's when now you start, you're entering the, I guess, into the offense arena.
Yes.
And
Yes. Go ahead.
yeah, so how, and then we are also told use intelligence to help the mind understand, right? I mean, I don't know. I am I just turned around? Like, do I just
Yes.
have it the other way around?
No, that's why I was mentioning that, because all those are true. Don't act on the like you mentioned. It says don't act on the cravings or the desires of the mind, right? At the same time, it says Savai Mana Krishna Padaravindir. At the same time, it says engage the mind in Krishna's service, right? So Prabhupada was doing a business. He was a businessman. He had a chemist shop. He was doing so many things. That's all the intelligence working, right? But where was his mind? Where was his heart? He was thinking of Krishna. I'm doing all this for Krishna. So that's the difference between the intelligence and the mind. The mind can always be focused on Krishna. So, yes, in terms of the material context, in the material world, when material desires come, don't act on it. Ignore the mind, neglect the mind, because that's the material desires of the mind that we're talking about. Once we do that part, we do the negative part of stopping the pushings of the mind, then the positive part is engage the mind in Krishna's service. Once the mind is purified, it is our spiritual mind, right? Because the material mind is just the covering on the spiritual mind, you could say in some ways. Once it's purified, what's left is the spiritual mind. And that mind, when it's focused on Krishna, then Krishna resides in that mind. This is why all the yogis, even the bhakti yogis, in Satyug, Dwapar, Treta Yug, they were always meditating. You think, well, if bhakti is active devotional service, and they're doing, why were they meditating? Because they're trying to focus their mind on Krishna. If the process was intelligence, then why weren't they, spending 10,000 years reading books? They could have read the Shastras for 10,000 years, and they did also. But eventually, most of them, they're meditating on Krishna, because Rupa Goswami says the only rule is always think of Krishna. This is another proof for this. The only regulation is don't think of anything else. Right? Only think of Krishna. Don't think of anything else. In chapter 12, when Krishna describes a yoga ladder, he says, just think of me always. And particularly the verses say, fix your mind on me. Right? The only rule, Krishna says, fix your mind on me. And then he says, if you cannot do that, then do this. If you cannot do that, then do this. And one of those things is, if you cannot do that, then jnana. Engage yourself in knowledge, sharpen your intelligence, and then you'll progress further. Gauranga Prabhu, in one lecture, he was mentioning that that's why we see the associates of Lord Chaitanya, they did not prize scholarship. The most intimate associates of the Lord, of course, they were all the greatest scholars also, but they were dancing and chanting day and night in Srivas Angan with tears coming down their eyes. And the scholars were being converted into bhaktas, into devotees, like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And Rupa Goswami, Jiva Goswami, they were all great devotees who also did scholarship. But the focus was not in knowledge of Krishna. The focus was fixing the mind on Krishna. And once the mind is fixed, everything else happens. But the knowledge is needed or helpful. That discrimination, like you're saying, is needed to come to the point where the mind is fixed. So this is why the focus on the intelligence, you find those passages, they say, sharpen your intelligence, read the book so that we can get to the point that the mind is fixed. It's the means to the end. And then also in the Gita, where it says, chapter 13, the banyan tree, it says that one should cut this strong entanglement of the banyan tree of material life with a sharp axe of knowledge and detachment, right? Knowledge and detachment. And then the acharyas further comment that after cutting it with a sharp axe of knowledge and detachment, which is buddhi, again, intelligence, then the devotee on the stage of pure love throws away that axe. It uses that axe to cut it, and then it throws it away. This doesn't mean then, the devotee stops using their intelligence in Krishna's service. But what this means is that the intelligence is not the driving force then. After that, it is the mind. And the intelligence follows the mind, because Krishna is resting, has arrived in the mind of a devotee. Yes.
Understand. That helps so much. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. It was actually a nice, deep comment. Thank you. And question. Okay, wonderful. So we will stop here. Thank you, everyone, for your very kind association and attention.